So a couple of videos ago, I talked about what would happen in Ukraine insofar as this war is concerned. I postulated that the Russians would try to take over the whole country and allow Poland to take over Western Ukraine, and that there would be a rump Ukraine, and that the Russians would basically punt the Western Ukraine and the rump Ukraine to other people, and they'd be like all kinds of chaos and blah, blah. It doesn't really matter if you believe in my point or not. That's not the purpose of that video. The purpose of the video was for you, to get you thinking rather, insofar as what would happen in Ukraine once this war is over. Because it's going to end one way or the other. All wars end. And so at this time, it seems pretty clear that the Russians are going to win. Now, in the previous video to this one that you're watching, I argued that the Russians have no intention of signing any peace deal, that they are going to capture all of Ukraine. They have to, because they cannot trust the West insofar as any deal. They're under no illusions that the war that they are fighting is not really with Ukraine, it's with NATO, with the West. And so they recognize that the West is just not capable of honoring any commitment, any contract, any peace treaty. The West only understands force. And the Russians understand this now. And they're going to take over the whole country. And they're not going to do any kind of ceasefire or peace negotiation until they have a complete handle on the entire Ukraine nation. And only then will they sit down to negotiate some sort of peace treaty. And my thinking is that they're going to take a big chunk of Ukraine, at least a third of the country, the southern part and the eastern part, including Odessa and Kharkov. And they'll make a peace treaty with what remains, but whatever remains is going to have some sort of puppet regime that's going to be friendly to Moscow. There is simply no other way for the Russians to proceed. They cannot allow an actual sovereign Ukraine to exist. They can't. Because if they do, it will simply be infiltrated by NATO minions, and they won't allow that. They've made up their minds. It's over. So just to argue about that is just like a waste of time, okay? It's like arguing, will the sun rise tomorrow or not? I mean, come on, So we understand what's going to happen in Ukraine. The exact shape, the exact details, they remain to be filled in. But the overall panorama is pretty clear. Now, the issue becomes, what's going to happen in Europe once it's clear that the Russians have won? Now, this is very, very interesting. You see, right now, the Europeans are more or less presenting a united front. It's we've got Hungary and Serbia and Croatia and a little other little countries that are a little bit, nervous, right? For reasons of their own, having to do with oil and the fact that they get their oil from pipelines and not ships. But that's not really important. What's important is to focus on the big countries of Europe. The UK, France, Germany, Italy. Those are the big countries. And insofar as the European Union, the latter three are the ones that count. Now, what's going to happen with those countries once it's clear that Russia has won, and once it's clear that Europe and the United Kingdom paid an enormous price for this war, for this sabotaging of its relationship with Russia? That's the real question. See, because they went whole hog on the whole sanctions thing, right? Oh, man. And now they're not going to get food, they're not going to get oil, they're not going to get gas. I mean, they talk about how the Europeans talk about how they're going to cut off, Russian oil exports to Europe, right? Like the sanctions, like they're going to sanction the Russians, right? See, back in 1973, OPEC cut off the West from its oil, right? And that caused a major recession. Okay. And so the Europeans are doing that to themselves, man. Dude, that's goddamn funny if you ask me. But anyway, the point is this very serious point. They're going to wake up. They're going to realize that they need Russian gas, they need Russian oil, they need Russian food. In, 6 months' time or less even, really. We're already starting to see it. The Europeans are going to be in financial and economic trouble, real trouble. And they're going to catch on finally that the Russians have no intention of conquering France again. Well, they didn't, but you know what I mean. They have no intention of marching on Paris or some shit like that. They don't even want to march on the Baltic republics. Okay, paranoid fantasies to the contrary. Now, the Russians, what they want is to have the ethnic Russians under their umbrella. That's what they want. That's what they've always wanted. They've been saying this for years, but the West just doesn't listen to them. You know, Vladimir Putin said this explicitly in his very, very long and very interesting interviews with Oliver Stone, which I suggest you watch. In those interviews, he goes specifically, Vladimir Putin says specifically, that it's a tragedy that something like 25, 30 million Russians overnight found themselves in foreign countries when the Soviet Union collapsed. And it's very obvious that what he wants is to bring those people back to Mother Russia, okay? Now, does that make him an imperialist, that he wants to, rebuild the Soviet Union or something like that? No. But he does want the ethnic Russians back under the umbrella of the Russian Federation. It's understandable. It's perfectly reasonable, okay? But let's leave that aside. Let's focus on what's going to happen after the war. After the war, the Europeans are going to realize, number one, the Russians are not going to march on, Riga or Vilnius or Paris or Berlin. They're going to realize this, and go, okay, fine, okay. Number two, they're going to realize that the sanctions are a complete disaster. They're already realizing it now, of course, but they're really going to realize it when people are without food, without heat, all kinds of social trouble is going to ensue. And so they're going to have to make peace with the Russians. They're going to have to crawl back to the Russians and ask for food and ask for gas and ask for all kinds of things. Because, see, something that the Europeans don't seem to realize or don't want to accept, or they're just too pig-headed to accept, Europe cannot survive without Russia. It's not more complicated. Europe, all of Europe, everything west of the Polish-Ukrainian border and the Polish-Belarusian border cannot survive without Russia. Simple as that. And that is a bitter pill that they're going to have to swallow, but they're going to have to swallow it, and right quick. Now, I've heard rumors from different people, different sources, more than one, that there are factions in the Italian government or the Italian, leadership class, the German leadership class, and the French leadership class that are making very quiet, moves, outreaches to Vladimir Putin, because they understand that their nations cannot survive without Russia, without Russian commodities, food and energy, of course. And so these tentative, outreaches. Well, these people at this time don't have the levers of power. The people who have the levers of power, or at least the ones who are making the decisions that are being implemented, are the crazy, Washington critters, the crazy neoliberal World Economic Forum types, these imbeciles who have crashed the European economy. These people are in charge now, but the other ones, the more realistic ones, who are reaching out to Russia, according to rumor, and I wouldn't be surprised. It's the logical thing to do. They're going to have to figure out how to make nice with Putin, with the Kremlin, with the Russians. And I think the price is going to be that they have to break with Washington. I think that Putin will say, you have to break with Washington. And see, I think the Europeans will do it. I think the Europeans will realize that it's either their survival or they continue to be a part of NATO and be a good ally and just go down the tubes. Because the United States is not rich enough to bail out Europe. It is not rich enough to provide the food and energy resources that Europe needs. And I think that Putin is basically going to tell Europe, time to decide. And that is going to be one of the most remarkable moments in political history, in diplomatic history. All of a sudden, you're going to see Germany, France, and Italy seriously considering breaking with the Americans. and we're going to see all kinds of political earthquakes. I mean, Olaf Scholz is the current chancellor of Germany. He's going to be gone. Gone! Okay? And whoever comes next is going to be the one who has to make this decision. Whether to break with the Europeans and embrace the Russians, or commit economic suicide, economic and social and political suicide in the name of the NATO military alliance. It's as simple as that. And the thing is, see, I would not be surprised if the Germans, they break with Washington, and they go so far as even restart Nord Stream 2. I don't think that we've heard the last of Nord Stream 2. I think that that's going to be an issue, But I do believe that the Germans and the French and the Italians will break with Washington. And I would not be surprised, and this is going to sound, I would not be surprised if there are factions in those three countries that at this time are negotiating some sort of pact so that they can make a negotiation as a united front with Russia, and at the same time, as a united front, break with the United States. I think that the Americans do not realize what they've done, because the current regimes in Europe, Ursula von der Leyen, Macron, Olaf Scholz, all of these neoliberal pinheads, Boris Johnson, who's an imbecile, all of these people, they are chihuahuas, and they decided to go with the Americans. But the more sensible Europeans are understanding that by doing so, they have put their entire continent in jeopardy. In economic jeopardy for sure, but also social and political jeopardy. We could have a complete disintegration of Europe. If there is hunger and energy shortages, rolling blackouts, people going cold in the winter, you have no idea the kind of social unrest that this can cause, especially because of all these immigrants. The immigrants, paradoxically enough, are like the dynamite of this particular situation. See? The immigrants I'm talking about, people who have been in Europe for less than a generation. People who were born in the Middle East or Africa somewhere and who have made it to Europe, and all of a sudden, no food, no electricity, and they're cold. At least in the Middle East and Africa, they weren't cold at night, but they're not going to put up with it. I think that there is a cabal of, leadership people who are not in positions of power yet. And they are coming together, or let us hope that they are coming together. Because if they're not coming together, if the Europeans are just going along and not really trying to fix anything, okay, then holy shit, they're going to have the worst winter since the Second World War. Yeah, they're going to have one of the most catastrophic winters since 44 to 45, or 45 to 46. Actually, that was probably worse. This is going to be a disaster. I mean, I'm talking like October through next April. People are going to literally freeze to death and starve. That hasn't happened in Europe in 3 generations. But it's going to happen now, unless the Europeans wise up and realize that they have to make nice with the Russians. Let's hope that they're smart enough to do that. Let's hope that they're smart enough to cut off their relationship with the Americans, which has been a disaster.